Hello, everyone. Welcome to Formlessness, the show that is always being. This episode is about the current situation globally and in the United States, because I'm in the United States and I will be sharing my personal experiences as a reflection of the universal whole. And yeah, there's things we need to talk about that are very, very serious and objective and explicit, which is a different energy than the show. I don't know. The show is meant to be something that can be anything, so it is always different. And this episode is about the current situation. So here is how I'm going to speak about this. As we globalize our intelligence as a species on the planet, there comes a time when that intelligence of communication, interconnected information sharing becomes saturated. And what I mean literally is that our intelligence, information communication, is as large as the physical planet, where we can perceive in a foundational, organized, scientific, true way how the information that we share between individuals affects and changes the reality of the planet in a closed system, in the sense that we can perceive in a grounded and fully realized way how one piece of information starts somewhere, goes somewhere else, and then comes back around full circle, because our awareness is as large as the planet itself. And this evolutionary process happens organically and naturally, and came to this place in 2020, where the natural realization of the evolution of our communication as a species is able to be seen in a 360 full circle way, where we can intuit emotionally and also see intellectually how things affect one another, and how those transits and cycles come full circle and go from their origination point all the way around back to the same origination point. So this is the fifth dimension. And what happened in 2020 is there was a chemical warfare device that was being worked on, which affects people physically and psychologically. And whether or not that was released intentionally or accidentally is the parabolic lesson of this realization of things being full circle, and being in our species evolution able to see how this energy of creation is a cyclical, circular reality. Being able to see this in the awareness of intellectual, physical reality in a true way. The lesson of this is that whether or not this was released intentionally to create chaos and keep the status quo in place where people in power can remain in power, or whether it was released accidentally, is a non-issue, because the lesson of this reality is that the very fact that this was being worked on is already evidence of a problem and a inconsistency with this reality being able to be created. In essence, another way of speaking about this that we can see in our own lives is that whenever we're trying to test someone in any way to understand something about them, we have already failed, because the very act of trying to test someone is acknowledging that you are manipulating the quantum reality and therefore influencing a negative response. In the sense, another way of saying this is like, if you're doubting someone, you are creating that failure in that person just by creating a binary either or. The reality is, like, if you're testing something for success or failure, it has already failed, because you need to because if you think you need to test something, you're already assuming that failure is a possibility, and by doing that, that reality exists quantumly. So maybe that's not understandable to everyone in the way I just spoke about it, so I'll add this before I move on. Well, let me move on in the linear progression of human consciousness evolution, and then I'll touch back on this in a few other ways during this episode, this talk. So we were meant to enter into this fifth dimension in 2020 naturally and organically, and everything was just it would have been a thing that is barely even perceptible, because it's such an integrated natural function, and everyone would, without even realizing it, understand these things, and it would be a completely integrated experience, in the sense that there's no one who would be outside of this awareness. It's just a natural evolutionary process. But because of this chemical warfare that is a psychologically damaging drug experience, whether physically or just proximity and being proximity to it, this creates so much trauma that trauma essentially destroys the memory of the individual's soul experience in their lives, and creates a new version of this person being born into the moment, forgetting the past knowledge that was stored in their body, because they've experienced a traumatic event which breaks that memory cycle. So since then, this function of trauma has been played upon greatly to maintain confusion and disempowerment in people. A lot of people have just taken advantage of this for different reasons, in parallel, just as people who are taking advantage of the situation. So aside from this, there's another problem which exists culturally in the United States, which is that people are conditioned to manipulate others without acknowledging it. And this is a hugely destructive problem, which I can see in my own life as every person I have been in a relationship with in my adult life has done this in a way where they will not acknowledge it. And because they will not acknowledge it, that relationship crumbles, their reality crumbles, and their reality continues to get smaller and smaller. And this is like the extreme vast majority of everyone essentially has a version of this that I have interacted with. And the people that don't are people that are successful in a grounded way. Artists, musicians, entrepreneurs, people who can communicate and acknowledge the ways that they are perceiving and manipulating the system, and who do, are therefore not being manipulative. The manipulation turns into a interaction and a working with something as opposed to manipulating it. Now, the way of communicating and existing interpersonally and with society is heavily conditioned through capitalism for this sort of playing the system, manipulating other people, doing all of this internal stuff and not acknowledging it and not being able to face it consciously and communicate clearly how we're doing this. And this problem has resulted in, and will continue to result in a diminishing reality where things become more and more manipulative, more and more scammy, and the line of existent life, the lifeline, which comes from existing in an aligned way with the formulas of the universe, essentially, using information, we can use what we know about reality to exist in a way that is in alignment with that, or in a symbiotic way with that. This is not that, and this is creating a reality of extreme diminishing returns where people's priorities have nothing to do with reality or life. They're in this strange, distorted social world that has nothing to do with anything life-giving, and it just continues to get more and more dysfunctional and destructive. So that's a huge problem in the United States, and I have not lived in other countries, so I don't, but I know that this plays into the overarching theme of seeing things coming full circle. And this also plays into Central and South America in ways that I've been aware of for a long time and have been exploring and studying what is going on in this reality. So I'll just say the truth of functional existence at this time, regardless of anything, just because of the fact that we're alive at this moment in time, there's only one way of existing in a healthy, functional manner, which is to realize the full circle of cause and effect, and how it always comes all the way around 360 degrees. This any change, any action, any perception always comes around. And so the way of existing in a healthy way around this is extremely simple. It is easy to understand. It's simple. It's one idea, which is that because everything is reflexive in this way, because whatever perception we send out is going to be reflected back to us, the only way to exist functionally in a healthy way is to be unconditional, which means to not think about an external concept, not think about something other than us and what concept that represents. Certainly things do represent external concepts, like this chocolate I'm looking at, I can see it's a chocolate, but I can be aware of that without being lost, without losing my own center, and without projecting this chocolate as having this external, separate reality. So I could look at this chocolate and I could say, wow, it's kind of deformed. It's probably made with unhealthy ingredients. All of these things, which, again, I can be aware of. I can look into those things. I can understand the manufacturing process and where it comes from and what the integrity around that is. But in terms of my existence, if I want to do something and be functional, as opposed to, if I don't have interest or time to look into this chocolate, the way of interacting with this in a healthy way is to realize that my perception is whatever judgment I have about something is a reflection on me. And so essentially, that may not have been the clearest metaphor, but the way to exist in a society with other people is just to be unconditionally accepting, because it's a huge waste of energy to judge someone and be upset at someone for something. Now, if someone is doing something, if someone is projecting something on you and someone is creating a directed action towards you based on some perception or some projection or some judgment, that is a huge problem. That is the only illegal thing to do. And it's natural to feel the effects of that, be upset about that, and realize that that's not okay. Now, anything else, the way someone looks, the way someone identifies themselves, the energies surrounding this person, they may not be something that you're drawn to, or they may not be your preference, but by being unconditionally accepting of everything, we bypass a completely, it's funny to say bypass something that is already benign. Like, we bypass this fallacy of having to go through all of these complex, draining, and regressive ways of perceiving someone in this conditional logic system. Like, if we have a conditional logic system, we are spending like thousands and thousands of magnitudes of energy on trying to decipher, well, is this right? Is this wrong? What do I think about this? This is the past reality, which comes from religion, comes from tribalism, comes from all this dogma. And it's just completely dysfunctional, and it results in horrible flaws that are not okay at all in terms of how we treat people, how we interact with people. So what I'm saying is, to interact with someone, it doesn't matter. Nothing matters but the moment, the present moment of interacting with someone. Everyone has lived in the past, but the past doesn't exist. The present moment is the only thing that exists. And when interacting with anybody, if we want to have a functional, healthy, and productive, life-giving interaction, we are using this unconditional acceptance and this realization of the full circle of energy, where I'm going to be nice to someone because I want someone to be nice to me. I'm going to accept someone because I want this person to accept me. I'm going to focus on my intention so that that is the primary subject of the interaction. Very simple, like so simple that it's almost hard to think about because it's so integrated. Now, this is the thing that I was saying earlier, like this information is within all of us and integrated so integrally that it is almost difficult to perceive from an intellectual standpoint. And yet, because of this extremely traumatic reality that has been thrown to us without consent over the past 4 years, people have gone on and out into these extremely distant lines of perception that are far from the reality of reality, that are based on all of these, like, this is the problem with humans who have self-realization, which is that people can get way far out on, like, someone's connected to a grounded truth that is based on science and nature, and then they write something or develop something, and then someone else reads that and then has their perception on that, and then someone else reads that, and it's like this, like, you get further and further and further away from having a direct experience with the functional reality of life itself. And then people, and this is how religions are created and dogmas and all of these things, where dogma is an interesting word, because dogma, the dog should be the masculine energy. And so maybe dogma, the word, reflects this sort of backwards distortion of universal energies that are created. But anyway, the reality is that this traumatic response causes people to cling to something for security and safety. And when that thing that's being clung to is a defunct self-perception based on a cultural and religious dogma that is heavily distorted and that has nothing to do with conscious existence at this point, this is extremely dysfunctional. So for me, in my experience, I have seen how people continue. Well, I mean, I don't know. I think that's maybe all I want to say. Yeah, like, there's no reason to look for judgment. If you're looking, this is the problem with this pedophilia microscope that is being, it's just stuck around for way too long, because there is this fundamental disconnection between our own dogmatic societal self-perception and the reality of life and humanity and the human species being being one with everything else. Like, we do exist and we are alive, and that is a reflection of universal nature. And what this represents is this disconnection in self-perception between the reality of how things work and how distant we can become in terms of our interaction and interrelationship with people. And so this is what needs to come together, come back into a functional way of existing. And it's interesting how the uprising and the rejection of this concept also represents the problem that the concept represents, which is being aggressive to other people without their consent and putting a perception on other people without their consent, which is sort of exactly what pedophilia represents. I mean, it's a horrible thing. And yet, the way of healing this is to not do to these people what what this concept represents. This is how all things are processed and healed, and any conflict that continues is because both sides are doing the exact same thing to one another, even though they have these differing perspectives. And this again is this failure to see how things come full circle, and also failure to see how the circle of life works, where there's nothing wrong with new life and old life commingling, and yet in the perception of human species, that becomes so distorted and so unhealthy and so destructive. And it's an interesting thing because the solution lies within the problem. And being able to, and this is the same thing as like being able, and we need to be able to consciously say how we are internally processing and functioning. This is going back to what I was saying earlier, where all of the relationships I've tried to incubate in my adult life I have had to step away from them because people are not acknowledging consciously what they are doing. Someone is doing an action that obviously represents they have some sort of perception and some sort of motive, and yet they will not speak that out consciously. And so I went to California at the beginning of the year, I guess actually in October of last year, because I realized this function at a level that was integrated and foundational and objective. And I felt myself to be experienced enough in this and practiced enough to hold that adult realization. And so I felt that at that time, about 6-7 months ago, I was ready to fully embrace myself as an adult. That's not what I mean to say, but fully enter into society and create these things that I want to create. And I just experienced a horrible reflection of extreme lack of awareness, extreme adolescence, aggression, projection, all of these things that are also in part conditioned into people because of this this idea that people who are self-empowered, people are conditioned to feel like people who are self-empowered are scary or something. And I think that happens because of this flawed post-capitalist reality where people who are already in power create manipulative self-perception realities for the masses to try and hold the control and power that they already have. So basically what I've experienced is every single person I know stabbing me in the back and breaking their trust and integrity forever by not being able to communicate or acknowledge their motives or true perception, and I found myself in really, really bad situations, which I currently am in. So um, I really want to and need to live in an environment that is functional and conscious. So if anyone out there has any space, any land, an extra place, anywhere that I can live, I am currently in a very bad situation where everyone around me is completely unconscious of what they're doing, and they're existing in this traumatic control mechanism where they're being traumatized, and then that, because everything is cyclical and because everything comes full circle, they traumatize other people because they're feeling mistreated, they mistreat others, and this cycle just continues to exist until it will eventually self-destruct. But that's not who I am, and I need to be living in a conscious environment. So yeah, please reach out to me if you have anywhere, if any piece of land or any extra living place. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff I want to say personally that I was planning on saying in this episode about my personal experiences and stuff, and it's amazing how by starting to speak in this way, all of that stuff just sort of drifts away, and it becomes clear that those things don't even need to be spoken about. All the frustration and mistreatment that I've been experiencing just dissolves when speaking about the realization of how things come full circle and how the universe is a reflective sphere, orb. So, yeah. How long have I been speaking for? 30 minutes, probably. I guess that's all I want to say. Oh, yeah. I mean, I was also going to talk about this other stuff where, essentially, I'll end on this. People, cultures, groups, societies who hold on to a resentment are the ones who create evil and recreate trauma and regress. And that is an extremely clear reality where anyone who holds on to resentment of a culture, of a person, of anything from the past will destroy themselves and destroy everything around them. So, it's extremely important to be able to speak and acknowledge the way that we feel, the way that we perceive, and if you can say out loud how you're feeling and why you're feeling that way, that will release you from this resentment of whatever it is. Someone who harmed you, situation that's frustrating, anything like that. If we can just acknowledge that in ourselves to the point where we can consciously say it, that will release that and allow us to move in the present and create new life. Satan, right? The clue is in the name, or the what is the word, like the solution is in the name. So Satan, say and tan, right? So if we say the things that we are keeping beneath our skin, if we say the things that we are, tan being something, your skin gets darker when you're in the sun, and that is in many ways the solution to healthy physical bodies. And if we can speak about the things that are coming to light and the things that we are keeping internal, then it's more, I think if we say the things that we keep internal, then we are releasing Satan back into connection with everything. We are connecting that segregated, separated sense of the idea of evil is this thing that judges itself for how bad it is, and by that judgment creates itself to be even more and more bad, because again, if we're judging ourselves, we're influencing the quantum field to create more reflections of judgment. So if we can speak this and release this back into interconnection with everything, it dissolves evil, dissolves this distorted perspective of judgment that just recreates the same things over and over. And by forgiving evil and wrongdoing, it dissolves back into perfect harmony and peace.